Hello, welcome to another video where I rant. Except for this time it's a little more personal. I love personal. But it's also going to have to do with how I do the thing. So I have a new version of the chart. It's actually real nice. I like it a lot. It's whoa, 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 whoa. So true. Okay. Um, What on earth? It looks a little funky on the monitor, but we're not going to worry about it. We're not going to worry about it. Okay. So basically what we're looking at is the new quadrants. The new quadrants. It's the same thing as last time. It just has more depth to it. This is mind/awareness. This is also resonance is in this corner. This is optimization, problem solving. This is like body. This is like how you solve things. So technically, this is more mind, but I'm not going to get into that. And it's also normalization. So that's acclimatizing to things. And I want to get into why I think that kind of is the way that it is. And I'm really curious about that. And then there is, oh, I forgot I can zoom in. Okay. Then there's gravity, mass. This is also emotions, and I'm gonna get into. They all play off of each other. It's all one system. But these are like the core components of it, and basically what gravity functionally affects you. And then there is. This is also your heart and action. Listen, metaphor is weird. And then there's your soul or your value matrix, basically how you interpret the importance of things in the world, consciously or unconsciously, that there has to be some kind of value system. Basically, what I have realized is part of the flow of life, and the flow of life for me specifically, is very dramatic ups and downs. So, depending on where you are on graph, normal life, I'd say for most people, generally has probably a pretty good ratio of good to bad, where there's certain dips into negativity, and usually people who are pretty normal, I'd usually say goes down to probably 50-50. Is it like when it gets past 50-50, then you should start getting concerned. I'm past 50-50, maybe. I don't know. So here's the weird thing about me is I actually don't. I feel like I have a pretty decent ratio of happy to miserable, but the problem is that it's so dramatic that like this isn't really that great. Like like manic episodes are not that fun. And if only the if only the downtrends were the same thing, but they're not. Basically because there's a safe range. There's this range right here which is like, an acclimatized amount of normal, and this is like, this is above 100 degrees, and this is below 0 degrees, if that makes sense. Like the standardization system of temperature, I think it's Celsius, whatever the American one is basically designed for what is habitable by humans. And so I might actually just start using that, where this is just past. This is past 100, and this is below 0, where it's basically a healthy amount and an unhealthy amount. And that's a little hard to explain. But peaking in sound design is what this is, where there's kind of a regular amount of stuff that a microphone can handle. And then when it gets past this point, it just like it starts hurting and making bad sounds. But the brain can actually it can comprehend that it's past this point, but it just starts breaking. It's weird. Anyway, part of normalization a part of this is basically that as you do more things, as you do this, it normalizes. So it starts looking like this, which means your range of capacity for things beyond this also grows. And I think that's fascinating. Where, what peaks actually gets further away. So this is probably why Dunning-Kruger kind of works the way that it does. Apparently it's not as exaggerated as this, but I still think it's very interesting. Where basically, when you first start learning about a thing, it's like, this is the signal, and you're like, holy shit, I'm so much better at the thing. And then you start engaging more and more with it, and it starts normalizing more, and you're like, oh, there's all this shit I don't know and can't know because I am limited in my capacity to learn all of these things. But I had a really interesting thought about normalization, where basically, if you have a resonance that is spinning, so to speak, there's basically movement in a certain dimension in space, right? Where it's like the sound wave is pressuring through the air, or like a particle. But, as you normalize to it, the thing that allows it to be normalized is that you're basically rotating it until, even though it is still spinning, it's spinning in a way that you're used to, and so from your perspective, it's not really doing anything. The reason you can start feeling it again is in new contexts. So when it starts being rotated by something else, that's when you start feeling it again. So, like, the reason why you want to normalize to good signals over bad signals, like, even though you can get used to a toxic relationship, you can normalize to that, or that you can normalize to having a really nice, healthy relationship, where both of those things can become emotionally neutral. But every time that there's a new context, every time something goes wrong, or there's an argument, or whatever else, that it's re-rotating the thing, so you start feeling it again in the context, right? That background noise just becomes background noise until you're trying to listen to a song, and it's either in key with the song that you're listening to or out of key with the song you're listening to. It's contextualized. And part of how your brain rotates things, how it focuses on things and prioritizes things, is this. It's a high dimensionality shape. This fucking thing. Where basically, if you laid out all of the things that are most important to you, this is, food. This is, if you're starving for most of your life, then food is going to be incredibly important. Or, I don't know, air if you live underwater. Or like, loved or being understood, or, having new experiences. And you can basically like pull this shape apart. You can pull apart all of the different dimensions of it. And figure out all of the things that matter to you. And there's probably some average curve right here where it's like really important things and then decreasing things over time. And that this is determined partially and initially by your genetics, and then over time by experiences, especially traumas and other weird extreme things, right? Where part of the fun thing of it is going to be weird to explain. Where technically it's kind of naturally more like this, where it's like there's a certain amount of signal you can have from eating food, right? And just like if you're just kind of hungry and then you eat food and then you stop being hungry, it's not going to have that much effect. But the more you push the basketball underwater, the more you starve, the higher the basketball can fly into the air, because there's a buoyancy effect around normalcy. And it's really weird for some people. Like, a lot of people don't understand this, is when you start starving for things, if you starve for a certain kind of love, for example, that you have no idea that you are so much in the red until you get the thing and you're like, holy shit. What is this heroin that I have just ingested? Um, Truly fascinating. And so that's why there's kind of different amounts of this, because all of these dimensions you can lay out next to each other the same way that you can, like, do like layout of a building and all of the different floors, where you can just set them next to each other and see the entire building laid flat on a two-dimensional space. But in reality, they're all their own dimensions that you can move in any of these dimensions, and it's higher than 3 dimensions, and so it's really hard to visualize. Actually, part of what you detect in people, and you can't tell that you detect in people, is them moving in 4 dimensions. So, this is a little ugly. Oh God. This is kind of why it's hard for some people to conceptualize other people, because usually you have one of these where you're more malleable or adaptive. Like, your solutions come from trying to adapt your emotions, or trying to adapt the solution, or trying to adapt the value, or trying to adapt your awareness. And so, if you pay attention, you can actually tell how people are moving across those different dimensions, and that's really cool. Anyway, I was going to get to a personal thing. Oh yeah, so basically, part of the really annoying thing about me is that I have a stupid amount of energy, and so I'll go from having weirdly high days to weirdly low days, and that some really minor things can just really fuck with me, which is really interesting, because I have. So part of what comes with normalizing to higher, building capacity, is a really weird thing, right? So when you're a 3-year-old, the difficulty of tying your shoes is like the most difficult thing, and for some people it's like too much. Like you can't quite visualize it, and so you have to learn how to tie a knot, and then you have to there's a process to learning the ability of tying your shoes. And then that becomes normalized, and then you can do more complicated things, and then it becomes so easy. There's autopilot, right? That when you start driving a car, there's a lot of manual effort you have to be doing to shift gears or hit the brake or check your rear view mirror. But then it becomes so easy that it's just dealt with by your second nature, by this automatic capacity. And then when there's more traffic, when there's a crash or somebody swerves or whatever else, then the signal becomes high enough for your conscious mind to start adjusting to it again. There's enough difficulty, and then it's Daytona racetrack for your life or whatever it is, where it becomes more complicated again. That there's a scaling process to that. And so part of the thing that I've been trying to figure out, shit, I might have to get back to that. So, one of the really annoying things about capacity is that it is not multidimensional, right? That you can have really high, so similar to your value chart, you can have really high capacity in one thing, and a thing that is 10 difficulty will have basically no effect on you, because you're used to dealing with 100%. You can deal with 100 units of difficulty. 50 is fine. This is part of what creates flow state, right? Where if the peak and valley is too sharp, this is very overwhelming to you. And if it's really shallow, then it's really boring to you. That's literally what the car and the Daytona racetrack are. But you can have that in one dimension. If you're really good at cooking, then making a grilled cheese sandwich is such a no-brainer, that you just kind of do it and probably make it great, right? That there's just a natural consequence. There's a multiplier. Oh, fuck, I gotta talk about the multiplier. God damn it. And then I'm gonna get to the weirdness of being pulled by seemingly small things. Yes, okay. Multiplier. So, when you have a certain amount of effect, if you spend a certain amount of energy, this is the weird black box part of the human brain that people don't understand. People put in a certain amount of effort and get back a certain amount of yield, right? That they can either accomplish a difficult task or just do something really well. Like a really good musician can play a really beautiful song without really trying, right? So that means that there's some factor here that we can't see that I call capacity. That is usually in here, but you can have high capacity in all of these things. It is in all of those things. What am I talking about? Anyway, so there's an invisible capacity in here. But you can say, if you spent 5 energy on this thing and you get a yield of 25, that this is not a visually accurate graph, but if you get a yield of 25, then you can approximate that you have some amount of, we'll call it 5 capacity in this box, where it's 5 times 5 is 25. And the reason why this is really important is that this is flow state. This is you at your ideal capacity is you got 5 times 5 is balanced. If you know anything about diminishing returns, this is how they work. If you graph all of the possible amounts of energy you could spend, it makes a bell curve, right? That if you spend, so if your capacity is 5, and so you spend 5 energy, when these are matching, you get the peak of the thing. If you spend 10 energy, 10 energy, then you're only going to get 50. Hold on. Yes? Yes. My brain might be rotting at the moment. But there is an ideal amount of capacity. When this stops becoming a square, then it becomes less optimal. This is the law of diminishing returns. I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But part of what's really interesting about the process of growth, so what challenges you are things that you aren't already capable of doing, if that makes sense, right? If it's already fine, like if it's already optimal, if it's already in this flow state, then you don't really have a reason to change it. The thing that helps you grow is when the challenge becomes just enough more than your ability that it benefits you to increase your ability to match it, right? That you don't need to spend as much energy if you learn this new thing, where now it's 6 difficulty and 6 capacity, where you're just slightly beyond the curve, right? That you want to aim for like this region right here, because if you get too much, if the challenge is 10, then it might be too challenging for you to reasonably learn. Anyway, I was getting back to something. Oh yeah, so basically, here's the really annoying thing about people, and this is really interesting. Like when people talk about like boss battle weaknesses, I think this is like kind of how they work in real life, where you can figure out how to take down a strong opponent by figuring out what their weaknesses are. What are weaknesses? They're the thing that you are not capable in. And theoretically, so here's the thing. You can either spend your life doing something like what I did, which is basically just kind of trying to even out as many of your capacities as possible. But if you do that, they're all going to be kind of pretty relatively low to anybody else who has spent any reasonable amount of time doing them. The nice thing is that it has some bleed effect. So as I get good at one thing, then it kind of bleeds out onto the other ones and makes them a little bit easier. You know, like if I learn how to draw, then it helps me a little bit when I paint or when I sculpt, or like there's overlapping abilities that they kind of leak out onto each other, and affect all of them. Bell curve things. But just because I am, capable in drawing doesn't mean I know how to handle emotional stress, for example, right? Where there's things that I'm good at and things that I'm bad at. And the funny thing is that a 10 stress thing for an 100 capacity person is very minimal. But a 10 stress thing for someone with 10 emotional capacity is going to be at the edge of their ability. Or a 20 emotional energy thing for the 10 capacity person is going to break them, right? Even if you're phenomenal at driving cars, you can still suck ass at talking to people. These are not overlapping skills. And so what you can do is you can keep finding where they're good at things and where they're bad at things by spinning them, right? You can rotate them through high dimensional space to put them into a space where they're competent and comfortable, or incompetent and uncomfortable, because it's all relative to the thing that you're dealing with. And this is kind of how you can find different areas that they're used to. Part of the reason why I like this system so much is that it kind of helps me personally, and I hope other people, have more bleed between the high capacity things and the low capacity things. So literally what this system has done for me has taken all of my rationality, logic, problem solving skills and helped, math stuff. Again, not very competent, but competent enough, and apply them onto subjective things, which I have very little framework with and not very much experience with. And probably neurodivergence, because I think about it so much. Because I'll get into that later. But basically, that when you have distorted perceptual things, that it is a lot easier for situations to become conscious. So, if you say something and somebody takes it completely different than how you meant, that means that it falls into this range of, needs to be adjusted. And so you have to, if it's spinning like this and it's like, oh my God, and you're feeling it, then you're just trying to keep rotating the card until it starts becoming normal again. But if you don't understand the fundamental underlying system of, the context or the social norms or the whatever else that they are running off of, then it's really hard to intuitively rotate the card to the place where it's normal. And that's really interesting. And that's also part of what comes with capacity. Anywho. I think that's most of it. All that to say, I have really weird peaks and valleys with my mental state, which is really annoying, where I'll be really weirdly happy and then really weirdly depressed, probably due to some chemical imbalance, serotonin, dopamine, I'm sure, norepinephrine, I never remember how to say it. The imbalances in this can also create really weird shapes in the system. But if you can just keep rotating and figure out where your peaks and valleys are, where your strengths and weaknesses are, then you can learn a lot. You can figure out a lot. Also, this chart here is the familiar alien. Okay, so this stuff is obvious. You can deal with that. This stuff up here is alien. This is novel / familiar. So, if you're talking to an emotionally literate person that is not intellectually literate, they might have a completely fine time dealing with heartbreak or whatever else, but something that is intellectually complicated will completely go out of their range. They'll just lose it entirely. And the opposite thing will be true if you're talking to an intelligent person that doesn't have great emotional intelligence, that, you know, not getting something you wanted and not understanding that's a thing that makes you upset will spike into alien. But, you know, solving a complicated equation will feel obvious. It's all relative based on how you rotate the card, because strengths and weaknesses. I aim for a sphere, but that's not, obviously, if you're trying to specialize, if you're trying to get really good at a particular thing, that's not going to be very effective. Anyway, that's updated resonance theory, slightly more cohesive. There we go.